Hi, this is George from the Return of the King channel. On the same day on the Jewish calendar that Noah entered the ark and the rains began, we see signs in the heaven of Christ coming to get his bride before the Lamb pours out his wrath on the world. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. 17th day of the second month at the time of Noah is the fall. It's the same calendar as today's Jewish civil calendar, in which the year begins on Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year. That day begins at sunset on November 12th and ends on sunset November 13th. That's 8:42 a.m. November 12th to 8:42 a.m. November 13th Central Time in the United States. This is the day we'll be looking at. On November 8th, there was a blood moon in the constellation of the Lamb, Aries. This blood moon in the constellation of the Lamb is a warning to the world and to Israel that judgment is about to be poured out, the wrath of the Lamb. The tribulation begins when the Lamb opens the seven seals. In Revelation 6:1 and 2, we read this: "Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say, with a voice like thunder, 'Come!' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. And its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer." In Revelation 6:15 and 17, we read this: "Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and the rocks, 'Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?'" To the bride of Christ, those who are protected by the blood of Christ, it's a sign for the bride to make herself ready, that her king is about to come and snatch her away from the dragon that dwells in the sea. The dragon who wants to devour her, and before he pours out his wrath on an unbelieving world. On November 8th, Jupiter from the Revelation 12 sign is in the constellation of the Christian, Pisces. On the day of the rapture, the fishes, the Christian, will be snatched away from the red dragon who dwells in the sea, who wants to devour the Christians. In 4 days, the moon, representing Christ, will move in the constellation of Gemini. Gemini represents Christ and his bride, the same day on the Jewish calendar that Noah entered the ark and the floodwaters came. This is day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4. It's now sunset on November 12th, the start of the 17th on the Jewish calendar. The moon representing Christ is in the constellation of Christ and the bride. The imagery in the heavens couldn't be clearer. Christ coming for his bride. The moon in the constellation of Gemini by itself is not enough. It happens every month. You need something else. That something else was the blood moon in the constellation of the Lamb, Aries. The moon in the constellation of the bride and groom on the same day that Noah entered the ark to escape the coming judgment. When Jesus came to earth the first time, there were 2 signs in the heavens, one at his birth and one just prior to his birth, a sign appearing on the Feast of Trumpets, heralding the coming of a king. The king planet Jupiter is in conjunction with Regulus, the king star, in the constellation of the king, Leo. Venus, the bright morning star, and Mercury are in the constellation of the Virgin, Virgo. The imagery here is that of a coming king, not a birth. When Jesus is born on Tabernacles in 3 BC, the full moon is in the constellation of the Lamb. The bright morning star is in the womb of Virgo, a perfect picture in the heavens of the birth of Christ, the Lamb of God. Just like the birth of Christ, there are 2 signs. The first sign is a blood moon in the constellation of the Lamb, a sign to the bride to prepare herself. The second sign appears 4 days later, the moon representing Christ, the Messiah, in the constellation of the bride and groom, Gemini. The imagery in the heavens couldn't be clearer. Christ coming for his bride. The pattern is very similar to what we just saw at the birth of Christ, but there's more. This is a chart of total solar and lunar eclipses. Starting with the blood moon tetrad, all lunar eclipses are shown. All the total solar eclipses starting with this solar eclipse are shown. There are a number of total solar eclipses before this eclipse, and they fit the theme of these eclipses, which is that of the rapture of the church, but we don't need them for this. This group of eclipses is about the rapture of the church. It ends with a total solar eclipse in the constellation of Gemini. During a total solar eclipse, both the moon and sun are in the same location, in this case, Gemini. Is this last eclipse in the rapture group of eclipses telling us that the moon will be in Gemini at the time of the rapture? We'll soon find out. The next eclipse after this occurs in the constellation of Sagittarius, the rider of the white horse. All of these eclipses have to do with Christ the Judge, the Antichrist, and then the coming judgment. The first group is about the rapture of the church. There are 7 blood moons. We will be gone for 7 years. The sun and the moon alternate between the constellation of Virgo, the bride, and Pisces, the Christian. From the last blood moon of the tetrad, it's 726 days to the Revelation 12 sign, a sign about the rapture of the church. 726 in Strong's is the Greek word harpazo, which is the rapture. After the Revelation 12 sign, there is a lunar triad, 3 blood moons in a row without a partial lunar eclipse between them. The sun and moon alternate between the constellations of Capricorn and Cancer. Cancer represents heaven and Capricorn represents the atonement. There's a link in the description of this video where I explain Cancer and Capricorn. After the rapture, when we meet Christ in the air, we're taken to heaven. And when does that meeting occur? Christ coming for his bride? It looks like when the moon is in the constellation of Gemini. This really looks like the day. If it's not, we'll be looking at when the moon enters Virgo the bride. That looks good too, but not nearly as good as this day. We don't know for certain if there will be a sign in the heavens on the day of the rapture, but if there is, this scene would certainly qualify as a sign of the day of the rapture. Thanks for watching.